So Alan Wake really wasn't a franchise that was on my radar at the time when I was younger. I mean, I always saw it and it seemed to get pretty favorable reviews, but I never really cared so much to actually dip my feet into the experience. I don't know, something about the way it was like released episodically just didn't really sit right with me, and I just didn't really want to play a game and then have to wait like a couple months for the next part to come out. Little did I know Telltale game series would do this exact same thing, and I would absolutely love that. But that's besides the point. Now, the people who have made Alan Wake kind of have a little bit of a checkered past. I mean, on one hand, they did create the Max Payne series, and that series is amazing, especially the third one in my opinion, just specifically for the gameplay alone. But they also did create the absolutely terrible game Quantum Break, and Control, which I heard mixed reviews about. But it did look pretty cool, I'll admit. So if the gameplay's fun, then, you know, who cares if the story's bad? I didn't even really care so much for Alan Wake until I saw the gameplay trailer for Alan Wake 2. I mean, it looks pretty clean. I mean, it seems like it's got a little bit of that RE4 remake vibe going on with it. But it looks pretty decent. I'm actually kind of excited to review it. And especially after playing this game, it seems like that would be a much welcome addition to the gameplay, which we will get into later. I decided to pick up this game because it was free for like one of the months of PlayStation Plus, I think it was last month. And I thought I could give a very unique perspective since I'm coming into the series completely blind. And I don't have any strong nostalgia for it. Anyways, for this retrospective, I will be going through each of the episodes 1 through 6, as well as the special episodes, or pretty much the DLC episodes that have appeared that make up the game experience as a whole. Then I will touch on some things that I liked, things I didn't like, and then give it a big old number. Without any further ado, let's get right into this.
Surprise!
Alice? What is this?
I guess I have a small confession to make. I thought maybe you could write here that a change of scenery would get you past...
Damn it, Alice, everyone
Hey,
keeps...
hey, just hear me out.
God damn it, Alice!
So it starts off with like an opening that's a little reminiscent of The Shining, and it even has a Stephen King quote to start it off with. So you already know that they're like trying to go a little bit more philosophical in here than most other games.
Stephen King once wrote,
"Flush the toilet with your pancake ass, bitch!"
It then jumps over into like Alan Wake's nightmare. In his nightmare, he hits some dude with his car, but he disappears after he goes to check on him. And the guy gets possessed or something, and he starts like trying to kill him. And then he just roasts the shit out of him for like a couple minutes.
You're a dummy, bitch!
One thing that I'll mention here is I didn't really encounter this all too much throughout the game. Maybe I just wasn't looking like super hard. But I did find a QR code here, and I found another one, I think, in the next episode. So the QR codes actually link to Remedy Studios' YouTube page, and they'll play like these, kind of interesting like videos of Alan Wake. But some of these videos can be like a little bit too revealing, especially if you've like just started this game. It can kind of put pieces together a little too quickly. I mean, especially this one that's like literally in the very first level of the game. A big part of the game is already like preemptively spoiled for you. Anyways, Alan finds a lighthouse, goes up it, and then is seemingly like found or possessed or killed by some sort of presence. And then his wife wakes him up on a ferry to Bright Falls. So a little bit of some background here, just so that things kind of make sense. And that's that Alan Wake is a very famous writer. He has created a series of books. It seems to be sort of like a crime drama thriller. But either way, he's extremely successful, and he's come here as sort of like a vacation. And on the ferry, he meets a guy named Pat Maine, who is the host of a local radio show, who immediately recognizes Alan and wants to invite him on his show, but he politely declines. saying that he's on holiday. And he also gets a call from Barry, his manager. And he doesn't sound like much now, but Barry is an absolute Chad, and he plays a major role in the story as a whole. So Alan's wife, Alice, takes him to the Bright Falls Diner, and there they're supposed to meet a man named Carl Stuckey, who's supposed to give him the keys to the cabin that they'll be staying at. And of course, since Alan Wake is a big time writer, there just so happens to be a cutout of him at the diner, and the broad that's up at the counter seems to recognize him, and he is absolutely pissed off about this. And he's kind of acting a little bit like a dick, to be completely honest. He does this like quite a lot. He just kind of act like a dick for no reason sometimes, but I can maybe understand, you know, if when you're famous, you just kind of get annoyed with this stuff all the time.
Try the coffee. Just don't blame me when you fall in love, 'cause it'll break your heart when you have to leave.
Rusty here is no longer human.
Did they just drop an Osaku Gonzai no longer human reference? I mean, I know this game is kind of trying to be like high art, so I wouldn't put it past them if this reference was intentional. Just something I kind of noticed. So yeah, there's nothing really much going on in the diner other than these two heavy rock dudes who are sitting in a booth and tell you to turn on the jukebox. And you would think with the way that they were dressed, it would be some sort of heavy metal ballad or something. But it's really just the Lime and the Coconut song, and these two dudes are like absolutely insane.
I've died and gone to hell.
You wouldn't believe me if I told you this, but these guys actually do play a major part in the story going forward. So just remember these two weird ass dudes, alright? Actually, pretty much everybody here comes back in some way and is actually integral to the story to at least some extent. And that also includes this old bitch right here who's like really afraid of the dark, who tells you like, you know, not to go down there because it's dark. And it's like woman, just get out of my way. I mean, the woman is hugging a damn lantern like a baby. I'm sorry, but just get out of my way. So Alan searches the entire restaurant and he can't find Stuckey, so he figures he must be in the shitter. But when he goes to check, then all of a sudden this old woman comes out and gives you the keys.
Carl couldn't make it, but I have the key for you and instructions on how to get to the lake. I wish you a good stay in my cabin. I'll come by later to check how you've settled in and to meet your wife. I insist.
Thanks.
Anyways, so Alan goes back to the car. Then almost with comedic timing, Stuckey comes running out of the restaurant like, hey, you forgot your keys. It's like, god damn, man, how long does it take you to pinch a loaf in there? But no, there's a reason and you'll see later. Anyways, they finally get there and they seem to really like it. Even though that Alan gets his cover blown by Rose calling in to the radio station and telling everybody that he's in the town. Man, dude just can't catch a break, can he? Anyways, they're winding down when Alice calls Alan into the room.
Well, hello there.
I'm not the surprise.
So yeah, instead of engaging in sexy time, Alice shows that she has gifted Alan a typewriter so that maybe he can write if inspiration strikes him. This seems to like piss Alan off like really fucking bad, and he actually leaves the cabin fully knowing that his wife would not run after him because she's afraid of the dark. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that she is like actually literally afraid of the dark, like deathly afraid of the dark. Like will have a full-blown panic attack if the lights go off. Actually, if you think about it, it's Alice's fault. How's he supposed to get any work done when he's all bricked up like this? Anyways, Alan hears some commotion going on back in the cabin, and it sounds like Alice is in trouble. And when he gets there, he sees the balcony is broken, and Alice is underneath the water. Alan then just fucking Assassin's Creed leap of faiths off this motherfucker. It's like, god damn. Like, I don't think I'd be jumping like that. I mean, maybe he was a swimmer in college or something, but like, sheesh, man. You don't be such a show-off. And not only that, but like, how do you know that there aren't rocks underneath there? But whatever, that's not even the weirdest part. The weirdest part is it then fades to black, and then Alan like wakes up in his damn car with blood all over his face, and he has to figure out what happened. Alright, now this part of the story was kind of weird, because I mean, since that we started the very first part of this game in a nightmare, I thought all of these enemies, which by the way are referred to as the Taken, because I guess they're taken by the darkness, I thought all of these guys were like in Alan's head or something. And he has like dream sequences where he has to fight these guys. I thought that's what was going on, but apparently no, like this is not a dream sequence. This is the real world. And when he checks the calendar, he finds out that he's actually been missing for a whole week. I actually didn't even put this together. Like, I thought this was all a dream until episode 2 happened. And I realized that, oh, this is actually not a dream. This is like legit the story. So yeah, I don't know, just kind of like a weird, you know, tonal shift like that. But whatever. Anyways, this section isn't really all that crazy. I mean, you have to battle Carl Stuckey, which was the guy who was going to give you the keys in the first part. So it shows that the darkness can actually literally possess people. So all of these people that Alan is fighting are actual people, and they are possessed by the darkness. And I guess when you kill them, they incinerate, which is convenient not only for the ESRB rating system, but for Alan Wake himself. Because I'm assuming he would have been thrown in jail a long time ago if he just would have left a trail of bodies everywhere he went. Anyways, Carl Stuckey finds Alan, and while he's running away, there's actually like a Shining reference.
Any second now, and Stuckey would be knocking on the door with his axe like Nicholson in The Shining.
Whack.
But whatever, Alan Wake retrieves his loadout and gets suited up. After slaughtering a lot of people, Alan then meets the sheriff, who is actually like pretty understanding of his situation. Like, even though he's like being completely incoherent, like they haven't seen him for a week, and his wife is missing, and he tells him to take him back to the cabin, and then when she actually does take him to the cabin, like he just kind of flips out. I don't know, man. Like, in reality, I would be like really fucking weirded out if this happened. And I mean, if I was a police officer, I would be hella suspicious if this dude and his wife went missing for a whole week, and then he just shows up out of the blue with a bunch of cuts all over him and a gun, and his wife is missing. Like all of that is just way too suspicious, okay? Anyways, with that, it ends chapter 1. So episode 2 starts off with a flashback, and I mean, it's pretty like sitcom-ish. Like, I mean, just take a look at this.
Honey, I'm home.
Back here, sweetie. How was it?
Worst weather I've ever seen.
You should put some coffee on. It'll warm you up. Oh, hey, I just finished those cover mock-ups. They're on your desk. Tell me what you think.
No kidding. I didn't think you'd get them done this quickly.
On occasion, I can perform all sorts of miracles, my dear.
Oh, really?
Well, you seemed to think so last night.
But it's actually a pretty okay segment for the most part. Anyways, this whole flashback sequence is to set up two things. One, to show how much of a caring husband that Alan is, and to show this element that will come back later in the story, obviously.
I used to have these nightmares when I was a kid. The dark really spooked me, too. When it got really bad, my mom gave me this old light switch. She called it the clicker.
The clicker, huh?
Yeah. If I ever got scared of the dark, I could just flip the switch and a magic light would scare the monsters away.
Oh, sure.
Here it is.
Alan.
Maybe it'll help you too. Whack.
All I'm saying, man, it's some pretty weak ass shit, man. Like, your wife is not impressed. In hindsight, it's actually kind of a sweet moment.
I love you, even if you are a liar.
That's a surprise tool that can help us later.
Anyways, he gets some implied flashback head, and now it's back to the present day.
Mr. Wake, how are you feeling?
I'm okay. My head's fine.
Anyways, that old bitch comes back and tests the lights, and the police station. And her name is Weaver, we find out. I'm only saying her name now because she actually isn't just a throwaway comic relief type character. Like, she actually does play some relevance to the story later. Anyways, we do see that Miss Weaver is like super anal about changing the lights out.
Now, can you tell me what happened?
I'm not sure. I can't remember. We were arguing. I walked out of the cabin.
How did you end up at Stucky's gas station?
I wanted to tell her what had happened last night, but I couldn't. She'd lock me up.
Dude, she is already gonna lock your ass up. Like, seriously, man. Like, dude, you admitted yourself that you were the last person to see your wife alive, number one. Number two, you just said that the last thing you remember happening was that you got into an argument. Like, dude, you are looking hella sus right now. I mean, they probably don't really have enough evidence to lock his ass up yet, at least I wouldn't think. I mean, just this whole thing is like really weird. Like, I mean, she's like not even really reacting all that much. I mean, I would have this dude in an interrogation booth like right now. So Alan Wake gets a call from what would seem to be some kidnappers. Turns out they got Alice, and they're asking that they meet him at a national park. Which is kind of weird that they wouldn't tell him to bring some money or something if this was an exchange. Like, no, they're literally just telling him to come there. Like, I don't know, something already seems like really weird about that. Although we can see that the kidnappers do mean business, since that they tell Alan to go out of the back. And he actually finds her license not too far from the police station. Anyways, Barry calls Alan and tells him that he's here in Bright Falls because obviously, I mean, the dude hasn't answered him in like a whole week. And the last that he heard, he was going on vacation, so he probably got weirded out. Also, you figure out later that these two are like best friends, like since their schooling days, so obviously they're kind of tight like that. Anyways, there's a doctor here at the police station by the name of Dr. Hartman. He's apologizing to Sarah since two of his patients, known as the Anderson brothers, broke out and caused a ruckus in the streets. He also mentions that they have dementia, which, I mean, that's gotta suck. Although, dementia or no, that does not excuse his terrible taste in music.
I'd like to leave.
But I need to know where you'll be staying so I can get in touch with you.
I'm Dr. Emil Hartman. I'd like to invite you to stay at Cauldron Lake Lodge.
Did you talk to my wife?
I had the pleasure of discussing your situation with her on several occasions.
Did you set something up with her?
I invited her here. My clinic is a place...
Bro, I don't even know what to say anymore, alright? Like, this dude is wildin', okay? He literally just assaulted a dude in a police station, and they're not arresting his ass. Like, I don't know what else to say. I can't even defend it anymore.
Hey, nobody move. Get your hands off of my client.
Who are you?
I'm Barry Wheeler, his agent. If you have business with Mr. Wake, you talk to me. You yokels won't know what hit you once I sick my lawyers on your asses.
Alright, so Barry, as you can see, is pretty damn funny, and he's just a bro in general. And if it wasn't for his massive big dick energy, Alan would probably be in a cell right now. I mean, he seriously just assaulted a freaking doctor in a police station. Like, what is wrong with this dude? Like, seriously. Like, if I was the police officer, like, his ass would be in a, not just a regular cell, a padded cell, man. I mean, this dude is insane. I mean, you can't be going around and assaulting people and then coming out the next day. I mean, what is this, New York? So, Alan tells Barry everything that's gone on so far. And Barry doesn't believe a fucking word of it. I mean, he does believe a few things. He believes that Alice probably was kidnapped and she is being held hostage. But he doesn't really believe any of the supernatural shit that he's been telling them, which is understandable. But he just kind of goes along with it because he thinks that this is great material that Alan needs to write his next book. So they go to the forest where the kidnappers told them to be. And in the meantime, Barry is interrogating Alan as to what the hell he's been up to for the past week, which is understandable.
Seriously, Al, what you were saying in the car? Just listen to yourself. What, you shot a guy? and his body just disappeared? When was the last time you slept? Are you high? Have you been drinking?
Alright, come on, dude. I gave you a lot of credit before. Like, come on, don't make me look bad. I mean, you're starting to sound like my freaking mom. We also meet this guy, Rusty, here, which we actually met him before in the diner, but I literally did not connect the pieces together. Like, this dude is, like, so forgettable. I totally forgot that he was one of the first characters we ever met. But yeah, basically, Rusty is dating Rose, the annoying girl in the diner. Anyways, I guess they rented this cabin or something so that Barry could stay in it in the nighttime and be safe.
Damn it, Barry, they'll kill her!
Anyways, Alan says to Barry he's gonna go and meet with the kidnappers. He just has to stay there, and if he's not there by morning, then call whoever he's gotta call. And Barry reluctantly agrees. I mean, I'm just saying though, if I was his friend, I would be like extremely concerned right now. I mean, I'm just saying, I would be highly suspect that he murdered his wife. Like, I'm just saying, okay? Along the way to meet the kidnappers, you find this TV playing an episode of this show called Night Springs, which is actually really freaking hilarious. It's basically a knockoff of The Twilight Zone. And it's actually done really well. Like, the actors that are acting it out, like, their voices are all pre-recorded. You can tell that the audio doesn't really match, like, the visuals. I don't know, it's just got, like, a really funny, nostalgic feel to it. Like, you're actually watching an episode of The Twilight Zone. And they do pop up every here and there, and they are actually entertaining to watch. And I really hope that this makes a return in Alan Wake 2. Because it would just be an absolute shame if we got to lose this quirky ass show. Anyways, there's some big commotion back at the main building where we rented the cabin. And Rusty's there and he's all fucked up, his legs all bent, and he's got some broken ribs. So Alan goes to turn on the power in the lodge, but he's too late. And Rusty turns to the darkness, so you gotta put him down. The only other thing worth noting while you're traveling there is Barry calls you back and basically apologizes for calling you crazy because he's starting to hear and see shit outside of the cabin. Alan tries to take a shortcut, but he ends up losing his gun and falling a considerable height that probably should have killed him, but he's the main character. And right before he's about to die, someone comes in and saves him. This person starts talking to Alan, and Alan quickly deduces that this is the kidnapper that he was supposed to meet.
Let's cut the act now. Where's my wife?
I knew you were gonna say that. I read it all before. You're a hell of a writer. Congratulations. You're gonna bring about something glorious and terrible once we get you some proper editorial control. I want the entire manuscript, or she's gonna suffer bad.
So what he's referring to here is that throughout the game, there's been these manuscript pages that you find every here and there. And normally, you just go around and you find like some extra trinkets, like in The Last of Us Part 2, you just find some like trinkets here and there, and some notes written in this place or in that place. And it's, kind of whatever. But no, these notes that you pick up and read are actually stuff that either just happened, is happening, or will happen in the future. And it actually is kind of interesting, and it does actually make you want to pick up all the pieces of the manuscript, or at least as many as you can find, to see what other characters are doing, or to see what might come next. And it actually is pretty cool. So I will admit, that actually is one thing I actually really do enjoy about this game. There was actually a couple of times it was actually very suspenseful. Also, Alan says that this dude was on the ferry when they were coming into town, which he actually was, but I guess I was just a scrub and I didn't actually talk to him because I just didn't see him and I just didn't have enough time. There is actually an interesting section that comes up here that actually doesn't happen again in the entire game, which actually I am kind of glad that it doesn't, but at the same time I was kind of bummed that I never saw it again. But basically, he has the gun and you have the flashlight, so you have to whittle down the monster's shields by focusing them on them, and then he will shoot them and finish them off. By the way, that's essentially how all combat works in this game, no matter what the enemy. They're basically shadow monsters, and you have to shine your flashlight at them, and there are different ways that you can take them down. I won't really get too much on the combat until the end of the video. But anyways, Alan gets really pissed off at the kidnapper at this point, and he assaults him because, you know, that's just what he does at this point. Like, seriously, he just physically assaults people that he's pissed off at, which is not something you would expect of a man who wears a jacket like that, I'm just saying. But anyways, he actually grabs the kidnapper's gun, and the kidnapper runs away with a turd tucked between his legs. I mean, I don't really know what the hell to think. I mean, this kidnapper is just weird as hell. I mean, let's go down the list, shall we? He tells Alan to meet him at this spot. He doesn't got Alice, and he also didn't tell him to bring any money. And then he lets Alan take his gun from him. Like, this kidnapper fucking sucks, bro. Anyways, Alan gets a call from Barry that he's being attacked at the cabin, so he comes back and dispatches them with relative ease. Anyways, so the kidnappers tell Alice that he needs to finish the manuscript in like 2 days, which is like an absurdly short time to write a manuscript. Like, seriously, dude. I mean, you gotta give the dude time in order to write shit. I mean, this is kidnapping 101, my guy. Anyways, Alan tries to, but he seems to have like some sort of like PTSD or something to writing. This is kind of explained, but I don't know, it's like really not as big of a deal as you would think it would be. I don't know, I mean, it just seemed like that was a really strong reaction to having to write, and it's really not necessarily explained why he's like that pissed off about it. I mean, I get he's like burnt out from writing like all these books all the time, but still. Oh yeah, and Barry gets a call from Rose stating that she's got all the manuscript pages, but it turns out she's been gobbledygooked by the darkness, and they're all walking into a trap. So Barry takes Alan to the trailer park where they're gonna meet with Rose, and Barry finds out some more information on the cabin at Cauldron Lake. Turns out it used to be owned by a guy named Thomas Zane, who they assume is a writer, but he couldn't find anything that he actually produced or wrote. Anyways, turns out the guy was also really good at diving, so much so that the place was known as Diver's Isle. Anyways, the volcano that's on the island erupted and covered the island over. He also saw that a woman named Barbara Jagger drowned in the lake a week earlier to that event. And it turns out that Thomas Zane and Barbara were lovers. So much so that it seems like everybody knows about it, including the guy who owns the trailer park here. And it is kind of funny how, like, you'll just be talking and he'll just interject every here and there, and Barry just gets progressively pissed off at him. Anyways, Barry does also note a very interesting similarity amongst all of these articles that he's been reading, and that's that they were all written by Cynthia Weaver, the crazy lamp lady that we've been seeing all over the place, checking everybody's light bulbs. Apparently she used to work at the local newspaper and then went crazy. Anyways, they make it to Rose's trailer, I guess, and just when they think they're about to get the manuscript, she slips them a Mickey Finn.
Hey, Al, what's... Oh...
Feeling good.
Anyways, Alan wakes up in Rose's room, which is probably not good. But we won't think too much about that. Anyways, Alan tries to find a car so he can get Barry out of there. When he gets to where his car is at, he's greeted by a crap ton of police officers and an FBI agent by the name of Agent Nightingale. Wake makes a break for it, and he just starts unloading on him. I mean, it didn't even matter that there was like this old dude like right next to him. And we've kind of been getting a little bit of context through some of the manuscripts at this point about his character, but nothing too substantial, only that he's just kind of been a prick. Anyways, it's actually kind of a cool chase scene. I mean, you know, you got all these like cop cars and cop lights like going all over the place. You know, it's kind of like reminiscent of like The Last of Us, you know, the first game where you're trying to escape the city and there's all these guards like popping out of the woodwork trying to find you. Anyways, after that misadventure in the woods, Alan meets that radio dude, Pat Maine, and he tries to squeak an interview out of him. But Agent Nightingale and Sheriff Sarah show up, and there is like no negotiations with this Nightingale dude. I mean, he just straight out tries to take a pock shot at Alan Wake's head and is reprimanded by Sarah while Alan escapes. Anyways, nothing really much happens in this segment. I mean, except for like a bulldozer boss fight, which was kind of neat, I'll admit. But still just more of the same of, you know, shining a flashlight on them until their shield breaks, and then, well, actually, after their shield breaks, they just die. At least for these environmental type bosses. Anyways, after Alan escapes the police, he realizes he's pretty much fucked since he has to meet the kidnappers to exchange Alice, and he hasn't even written anything yet. So he decides he's just gonna do what all great writers do and just wing it. He's just gonna show up there with his dick in his hand and hope for the best. Definitely not the best plan, but he's kind of out of options at this point. Anyways, Alan Wake makes it to the sawmill, but the kidnappers never show up, and then nighttime rolls around and he tells you to meet him at some mountain close to the area. Which, I mean, at this point, it's just fucking ridiculous. I mean, the kidnappers fail to show up to their own fucking exchange? Like, I've said it once before, but man, this dude like fucking sucks, man. Also, I don't know why, but it took me like forever to get out of this room. All you had to do was just jump over this like little chain rope here. Anyways, this next part is probably the second longest section I actually went through without taking any notes, because like literally nothing happens here. But yeah, it's a pretty good sizable chunk of the story. I mean, it's probably like a good like hour or two maybe it took me to get here. But anyways, point being, you make it to the location and you can hear this dude off in the distance getting the absolute shit tortured out of him by what we can only assume is the darkness. And he confesses that he doesn't actually have Alan Wake's wife. But before Alan can ask him any questions, the darkness kind of like picks him up and then kills him, I guess. And Alan gets taken too, but he's actually lucky enough to light off a flare, and the darkness drops him into the water below. But he's saved by a shadowy but also familiar looking shape. I'm just gonna say this right now, episode 3 was boring. Like, I mean, look at this damn timeline I made right here. There is just no notes, or at least barely any notes written in episode 3. Like, nothing really seemed to happen in this one. I mean, compared to the other ones, it is kind of like more of a filler type episode. I mean, don't get me wrong, shit definitely happens. But there is just like a big section where you're just kind of running from the police, and then you're trying to trek to the sawmill, and then you have to trek up this damn mountain to get to the kidnappers. I will say something that I did think was a little interesting, and that is that I thought it was a bit strange how you're kind of given like free roam, a little bit of free roam in this part, where you can actually like jump into like various different cars that are just kind of like hanging around, I guess with the keys inside of them or something, and you can kind of just like, you know, go from like car to car, and like, you know, you can take like a Jeep to go off-road, or like a regular car to go, you know, on roads and stuff like that. It actually is a bit interesting because I actually was reading a little bit of history into Remedy Studios, and they actually said that the first 3 years that they were developing Alan Wake, they were actually hoping more for an open world survival horror type game. But they decided that the scope that they were trying to do would be too big, and they decided to go for a more linear format. And you can definitely see the bones of this ambitious type open world project in this and in later episodes. So episode 4 starts off with Alan Wake waking up in... Alan Wake waking up. But yes, Alan waking up in the loony bin, like a legit literal asylum. Well, it's actually more of like a rehabilitation center, for people that used to be famous, run by this dog fart, Dr. Hartman. And I will actually say that this actually did give me a bit of a double take when I first played it. He does actually make some pretty good points that everything that has led up to this point could have just been in Alan Wake's head. And for a second, you almost kind of believe it. Also, I don't know why, but like the doctor keeps doing this weird thing with his hand, and it's like really fucking annoying. Like, I guess they like, you know, just had his hand stay like this so that like when he would unlock doors, it wouldn't be weird. But I don't know, it's like 10 times as weird. I mean, it looks like he's about to give me a prostate exam in any second. So yeah, Dr. Hartman just brings you around to various different people in the asylum, and he eventually brings you to the Anderson brothers, who actually just kind of spit some truth at you for like 3 or 4 minutes straight. And I will admit, you know, I did kind of think these dudes were a little goofy, and they still are pretty goofy, but they're actually kind of cool. Like, they help you out quite a lot in this bit. Anyways, the Anderson brothers are really cryptic, but they basically tell you that they're essentially just as crazy as you are, and they can see the dark beings just like you can, and they've been dealing with it for a lot longer. They even used to be in a hardcore metal band way back in the day called the Old Gods, and their names used to be Thor and Odin, which you actually later learned out that Odin actually purposefully ripped out his own eye, just like the Nordic myth himself. Anyways, basically they say that if you go back to their farm, then you can learn their secret as to how to defeat the darkness. But yeah, after they basically spit a bunch of truth at you for like 4.5 minutes straight, they then get really tired and just kind of fall asleep on you. So Alan just decides to return to his room and see if he can type anything. I do also find it incredibly funny that these two old dudes are actually playing a game of Night Springs, which is just absolutely hilarious. Anyways, Wake returns to his room and he tries to write something, but he has the same sort of PTSD shit, so he just can't put shit to paper. But that's okay, because there seems to be some sort of riot going on in the asylum, and by riot, I mean literally the Anderson brothers take over the entire damn asylum single-handed. I mean, they bonked the receptionist, and the security guard locks himself in the bathroom. I mean, it is just ridiculous at this point. Like, you literally have 2 senior citizens that take over a whole fucking asylum. I mean, that really just shows you the type of security they got going on in this place. As we explore the asylum, we actually do find like this recording of Alice when she called Dr. Hartman, and even though it's spliced up a little bit, she does kind of, you know, roast Alan a little bit here, I'm not gonna lie.
Now, Mrs. Wake, can you tell me about Alan's problems?
He's more and more out of control all the time. The parties, he's so angry all the time. He's getting violent.
God damn it, Alice! My clinic is a place where...
Hey! You touch her though!
And it also seems like Alan's suspicion is confirmed when he sees that the person that was claiming to have kidnapped his wife and who biffed it just a little bit ago is actually part of the hospital staff here.
I want the entire manuscript, or she's gonna suffer bad.
So that was a fucking lie.
We go a little bit further into the asylum and we see that Barry is actually here too. Apparently he came here looking for us and some goons clobbered him and stuck him in the closet. And I guess he must have stolen this giant Alan Wake cutout from Rose at some point as well, just to kind of stick it to her. But I mean, she was under the darkness's influence, so, you know, it's like you kind of have to cut her a little bit of a break there. I mean, she is his #1 fan, so, you know. Anyway, so Alan gets the manuscripts back from Hartman's office, and Hartman confronts them, and his facade crumbles like a house of cards under the slightest bit of pressure, since that Alan's actually got a gun now. So it seems like this dude's plan was kind of like opportunistic. He wanted to get Alan Wake into his hospital, but when he realized that that wasn't going to happen and that Alice was missing, they decided to roll with that narrative and pretend to be the kidnappers. Which, I mean, I guess is not like the worst idea. They just happened to pick the wrong writer. Found a corner. Fucking asshole. So they managed to find a car and drive the hell out of there. And Alan relays the information that the kidnapper was working for Dr. Hartman and they never actually had Alice in the first place, and that Alan feels like she is still trapped underneath the Cauldron Lake. And of course he pieces together what we've already known, and that's that the manuscript that he wrote at some point has been playing out exactly how it was written. And he also informs Barry about the Anderson brothers and Thomas Zane, and about how he can find his answers at the Anderson brothers' place because they wrote down basically how to defeat the darkness and all this stuff. It's basically just an exposition dump, just in case if, you know, you weren't following along at this point.
Find it.
Look out!
Oh shit! But anyways, Barry can't control the damn car and it flies off the road and they get separated, but it's really no big deal. I mean, this is also like one of those sections where like not really much happens. It's just a lot of gameplay and, you know, just a bunch of like filler exposition stuff. But the only real thing of note is that you see like some random like moonshine thief like Biffet in here from the darkness.
Who wrote this crap anyway?
And there actually is like the most badass section in the whole game where you have to fight off all these monsters while Barry mans the controls for the Anderson brothers stage pyrotechnics, which is pretty damn awesome to be slaying all of these Taken and all these fireworks are going off and music is bumping. It's a pretty cool section, I'm not even gonna lie. Like, game is worth it pretty much just for this one section. Anyways, he finally makes it to the house and plays the song.
The world could do.
That
It's
shit
like I
sucks. Damn.
So anyways, Alan figures out that the song is actually referring to Cynthia Weaver, and they plan to head back into town when daybreak comes. But in the meantime, Barry suggests that they get shit-faced drunk, and Alan actually accepts it for once. And it actually leads to a pretty funny scene where there's actually some much-needed levity that's injected into the story.
What do they put in this stuff? I feel like my brain is coming out of my nose.
I'm feeling good. And a motherfucker.
Anyways, it turns out that the Anderson brothers and everybody else wasn't actually joking. Like, their moonshine doesn't just get you drunk as fuck, but it actually allows you to have a fucking out-of-body experience. I mean, damn, what the hell is in that stuff? Anyway, so it picks back up right where we left off. You know, Alan diving in after his wife. He can't find her, and he's like really guilty about leaving her in the darkness. And then Barbara Jagger, who's possessed by the darkness, comes out and guilt trips the fuck out of this dude. But she says it's all alright. If he follows her instructions, he can get her back. So he starts listening to her, but he realizes that if he follows through with this, it would quickly destroy potentially the entire town. Or maybe even the world, perhaps? Even though he was under her influence, he was still able to write his own escape into the story, and also write in Thomas Zane as well. Which, like, knowing what happens later, like, this delves into, like, some pretty crazy topics, which you'll see what I mean. I'll address it when we get to it. Anyways, and then obviously, you know, a whole week goes by of him writing this manuscript. Thomas Zane breaks in, saves him, he books it to the car, and the rest is history. Anyways, Right when Alan wakes up, he finds Agent Nightingale looking over him with the barrel of a .45 right in his face. Well, fuck. So episode 5 starts off with Alan and Barry waking up in the clink, hung over as fuck. Agent Nightingale comes in to kind of taunt you a little bit, along with Sarah, who is becoming more and more frustrated with Nightingale's tactics. And then all of a sudden, Alan has some sort of realization beamed into his head. Sarah opens up the cell to talk to him, and Nightingale is acting incredibly aggressive here. But yeah, basically, Nightingale is like drunk as fuck, and he's like an FBI dude, and Sarah really doesn't appreciate that sort of thing. You know, total abuse of power and all that stuff. But Nightingale doesn't really give a fuck, and he calls Alan Wake Stephen King, and then realizes that he actually read this in the manuscript, and right then he's taken by the darkness. And it is actually really funny because you can actually read the manuscript page that he dropped, and it is literally the funniest thing I have read this entire game.
He didn't understand half of it, but it all rang true. Impossibly true. He took out his hip flask when he reached the page that described how he reached the page that made him take out his hip flask. It wasn't the booze that made his mind reel.
Anyways, Sheriff Sarah at this point is like 100% on board with Alan. And I mean, she's actually always been on board with Alan. And like I said, I was a little bit frustrated because I kind of thought she would be like more gung-ho about like locking Alan up. And then she would like slowly see reason over time. And of course with Nightingale's like, you know, more conflicting nature, like she kind of like passes him like 2 ships in a night. And then she actually slowly learns to, you know, accept his reality of things. But no, she's actually, like, extremely accepting of everything. And, you know, if you read, like, the comics and stuff like that, you know, this will make a bit more sense. But I'm just saying, you know, that sort of shit should be at least rudimentally explained so that we can at least be in on the knowledge. Anyways, she tells Barry to stay back at the police station and ring all of the surrounding police stations along with a couple of people that she knows personally to alert them about what's been going on while her and Alan Wake secure a chopper. You know, it was right about now when I realized that, man, they really do tease Barry's death like a lot in this game. Like, I mean, this is probably like the 3rd or 4th manuscript where I was legitimately thinking that they were going to kill off Barry in the next scene. But, I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's just me and my gullible ass. Anyways, after trying to find the helicopter, turning on generators, doing all this stuff, fighting all over the city, we finally see that the sheriff's station was taken over, so Barry ran out, and they threw a bus at him, and now, you know, we're pretty sure that he's alive, but, you know, could be the other case, but he's probably alive, obviously. Anyways, next time you meet Barry, he has completely donned the insanity cowl, or in this case, I should probably say headlamp, and has embraced himself as the action hero sidekick, complete with Eye of Mordor and everything. No, like, that's like legit what he says.
See this headlamp? It's like a superpower. I can just look at one of those things and they die. It's my flaming Eye of Mordor.
Anyways, they start up the helicopter, which this scene actually was pretty cool. It reminded me of Left 4 Dead when you're at Mercy Hospital and you have to fight your way to the helicopter.
I used to tease Dad that he was just like Alex Casey.
You've read me.
Oh, sure. You're a pretty good writer. A little heavy on the metaphors, maybe.
Nobody's ever said that before.
Dude, like, come on. I don't know what they were kind of going at for with this. Like, if there was, like, gonna be some sort of, like, romantic element between the two. I mean, there might be, like, some sexual chemistry, like, going on there. But, you know, I don't know. It was just kind of weird. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it was meant to come off as, like, camaraderie. But I don't know. Like, you seriously, like, are you serious, Alan? You seriously saying, like, no one has ever told you were a good writer before? Like, come on. Anyways, a bunch of birds fly into the helicopter, and using the Sullivan technique, she's able not to crash the copter, but Alan Wake does fall out in the process. Anyways, this part is actually pretty cool with the helicopter, because, you know, the helicopter will help you sort of fight, because it's got this big giant spotlight that beams onto the ground, and, you know, you can kind of just stand in the middle of it, or you can use it to your advantage if you run out of batteries to kind of damage them in another way. It's actually kind of cool, I'm not gonna lie. Like, there are actually these like flashes in the pan sort of, you know, gameplay moments where it's actually pretty cool, I gotta admit. Anyways, Alan finally makes it to the electric dam and meets Cynthia Weaver. He basically tells you that there is a secret weapon that she has hidden in a place called the Well-Lit Room. Wow, real original, you know what I mean? Her plan to get there is to take this ginormous tunnel that leads underneath the lake, but the problem is it doesn't have any lights on, and obviously if the darkness can spawn things out of shadowy areas, then they're pretty much screwed. So you gotta have a quick little journey and turn on generators and come right back. Spiff spot, no big deal. Oh yeah, and like something I noticed about this game is it'll like give me this warning that it's stopping like all recordings. Like, I don't know exactly why it does this. It seems to do it at like random intervals. Like, I'm not exactly sure why it does this, but I remember, you know, some games would do this like if there was copyrighted music or something along the line. Anyways, the crazy lady here actually does give a pretty good exposition dump that tells the backstory of Thomas Zane. Turns out Thomas Zane's wife Barbara died, and he tried to bring her back, but it didn't really go so well, and she turns into the beast that we have seen thus far. And then, in an attempt to right his wrongs, well, quite literally at this point, he actually wrote himself, Barbara, and everything that they ever did, including all of their accomplishments, out of existence, which is actually a pretty honorable thing to do.
We are characters trapped in a story you have written.
Anyways, they're traveling in the tunnel, and Alan gets a call from Barry, and he explains the entire situation, but then they crash because of all those birds, and then Alan goes out to save them, which takes up a good chunk of time, I'll admit. Although I will say this section did have like the closest thing to an actual turret section in the game. Like, you have to take control of this big spotlight. It pretty much will kill anything that it touches. So, I mean, that actually was kind of cool, I'm not gonna lie. Anyways, standard stuff happens. You trek out there. Turns out they didn't die. You go a little bit further. They're fighting the darkness. You help them fight it off. And then you find Cynthia again. And you guys continue to the well-lit room.
The page was autobiographical, a memory from my childhood. But I didn't write this. It was a page written by Thomas Zane.
Alan, 7 years old, would fight sleep to the bitter end. One evening, his mother, sitting by his bed, offered him an old light switch. To imbue the talisman with all possible power, she added that it had been given to her by Alan's father. Alan never knew him, and anything of his took on mythical proportions in his mind. With the clicker firmly in his hand,
damn it!
So, like, this part actually did kind of blow my mind. Alan's trying to find a way so that he can write himself and his wife to escape this madness. But it turns out that Thomas Zane may have actually been the one who actually created Alan Wake in the first place and set all this shit back in motion way back in the day. Like, that is freaking nuts to think about. You know, that sort of stuff when it comes to like predestination and fate and the illusion of free will, like that sort of stuff always gets my jimmies rustled. And this is even further cemented home when we see the actual clicker that Alan was talking about is there. And of course, from the dialogue, it is heavily implied that that was just a story element that he used to give Alan Wake some background and a way to defeat the darkness. Which, like I said, that is like absolutely insane. And that actually is really funny when you look back at that previous scene with Alan and his wife.
Yeah, nice story, writer boy. You made that up right now, didn't you?
So, you know, end of episode 5. Pretty cool. It actually answers a lot of shit that I had a lot of questions on, while still leaving room for more questions, which is what a good story should do, especially if they're going to continue it. So the final episode starts with a flashback, and Alan Wake is watching himself on a talk show, which must be like really weird to see. And then Alan's wife comes home, and he's being like kind of a fucking dick to her, because he's hungover as fuck from going out drinking with Barry. But it wasn't like for fun, it was for business. You go out with like a business client or something, you guys have drinks and have fun and stuff like that, so it has to keep up appearances, you know. But anyways, it's here where he apologizes to his wife and promises after his tour is done, they'll take a nice long vacation. And as they say, the rest is history. Anyways, Alan's plan is to go back to the cabin somehow. I mean, it's not there now, but somehow he's gonna find his way back to the cabin and write the actual ending in. Sarah and Barry are totally on board to help him, but he claims that this is something that he needs to do on his own. And to make sure they don't follow him, he actually pulls a gun on the fucking sheriff and has Barry take her gun. Like, come on, not okay, dude. I thought you guys were past this shit. What is with Alan Wake and pulling guns on people or assaulting people? Like, seriously, this dude got some problems. More than he already does. Anyways, this last part is definitely one of those famous video game tropes of the last level, where they put everything that you've ever learned in the game to a test. And that's basically what it is. It's just a big gauntlet where you just have to fight enemy after enemy. And there's really nothing else to talk about, except for the fact that I went through this entire game and I didn't even realize that there were freaking flare gun kill cams. Like, how crazy is that? But yeah, basically he fights his way to the cabin, and then he does like a fucking Assassin's Creed leap of faith right into a fucking nightmare. After you defeat the nightmare, Zane actually appears. He basically tells you that this woman is like absolutely pure evil. I mean, not the woman itself, but I mean, obviously it's infesting the body of this woman. But yeah, the darkness itself is just pure evil incarnate. So the only way to defeat her is to fill her heart with light. And then Alan like meets like a mirror version of himself, and Zane tells him don't mind him, he's just Mr. Scratchy, and that his friends will be the ones that are meeting him when he's gone. Which I'll try to remember this and talk about this later. Anyways, this last section, you're just kind of shining your flashlight on a bunch of words, and whatever it is that you're shining your flashlight on, like the words, the actual thing will be written into existence. So, it was kind of a cool section. Anyways, he finally gets to the cabin, he meets Barbara Jagger, and he fills that hoe's heart with light.
Should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light.
Anyways, so the very end of the game, it is shown that Alice is returned, but Alan is not. And it seems like he has actually been generous enough to write everybody else's happy endings, except for Rose, because she's a weirdo, and Nightingale, because he's a dick, and I guess also Carl Stuckey, because that motherfucker just be laying like massive log-sized dumps all over town, and everybody just fed up with it. And then of course it leaves us on a cliffhanger, with Alan typing away on the typewriter, saying that the lake isn't actually a lake, it's an ocean, whatever that's supposed to mean. Anyways, I also decided to play through The Signal and The Writer, which are the two DLC stories that they have here. But basically, these two DLCs can be summed up with this. It was all essentially Alan snapping awake from what seems like an existential crisis of being trapped in the dark place forever. But instead of taking it like a bitch, he decides to do the impossible and write his way back into his own life before his thoughts stray again and he loses himself again. I guess when you're in the dark place, all filled with negative energy, so you can kind of get lost in your thoughts sometimes. And he's been stuck down there for who knows how long. I was kind of bummed. I was kind of hoping for more of a, an epilogue. I mean, don't get me wrong, the combat in these DLC sections were absolutely amazing. I mean, goddamn, they were just really good. I mean, they had like all this really cool stuff where you had to shine your flashlight on the words in order for them to drop certain things. And then there was even like a crazy like puzzle platforming section, and it actually did lead to some pretty funny moments. Like there's one where Dr. Hartman is talking to like a version of Alan Wake, and he actually makes a pretty good case as to why the entire game might have actually been in his own mind. And it's actually not a bad argument too, like seriously. At least you got Barry on your side for this DLC adventure. And Thomas Zane also helps you out too, here and there, to try to find yourself. And you do actually get some pretty funny moments with Illusion Barry.
Thing is, you need to get all rational here. Abandon your fantasies, right? Well, I kinda hate to say this, pal, but I'm one.
Fine, you're abandoned. Fine.
What does it say about this just to keep yourself from getting better?
It is kind of sad that you do have to fight him at the end. So what I think about this game overall as a whole. It was definitely fun. I gotta admit, it's one of those games where like you finish it and you're kind of like, well, that kind of sucked. It didn't really explain anything. And then you look through some of the footage that you've gathered and you're like, well, yeah, actually, you know what? Yeah, it did actually explain the story pretty well. Like, I actually had a completely different opinion of this story when I first came out of it. But then, as I was pulling through the footage for this, I just kept finding more and more references and more things that actually made the story really cool. That being said, gameplay can feel a little dated at times, especially in episode 3. I mean, my god. It was just non-stop enemies coming at you in forest. Like, that was it. But they do throw in a couple of things here and there to, vary up the combat. And the DLC was actually really fun to play through. But it just really didn't offer that much in the way of actual story content. But I will admit, it was actually really awesome trying to find all of the manuscript pieces and hearing all of the backstory that was in the game and trying to piece things together. Like, there was actually a lot of stuff I missed in my first playthrough. And there's stuff that you can't even unlock unless you go through it in nightmare difficulty. So now on to the gameplay. The gameplay is actually pretty good for the most part. A little bit dated, if you ask me, but I mean, obviously, it came out quite a while ago. But basically, the crux of the combat is they're shadow enemies, so you need to shine your flashlight on them until their, barrier breaks. And then you can actually shoot them with a pistol or a rifle or a shotgun to damage them further and then eventually kill them. Now, once their shield is popped off, it can't come back. At least I don't think it can. I mean, maybe I just never actually let that happen. But regardless, it was pretty interesting combat. I will say all the weapons really do kind of have a meaty punch to them. Like, you actually feel like you're punching holes through these guys, and especially when, their bodies just sort of explode. It is actually a pretty cool effect. And you can definitely see some of the, Max Payne inspiration bleeding through into this game. I mean, Thomas Zane and the dude that he wrote all of those crime dramas about, Casey, is literally voiced by the same voice actor who plays Max Payne. Well, at least in the third one. But yeah, the variety of weapons isn't really all that much. I mean, you do have your standard revolver, which you can't get like any cool variations of this. Like, I was kind of bummed. I thought it'd be kind of cool if you could get like a, like an M1911. Then there's also flashbangs, which will basically kill anything around you, no matter what it is. Like, I mean, I even would use it on bosses, and it would take down huge chunks of their health. And then there's flares, which flares are very good if you need some breathing room. If you're kind of getting swarmed by a bunch of guys, you can pop a flare and it'll push them back in all directions. The shotgun and the hunting rifle pretty much just feel like the same thing, maybe different skins. I mean, you obviously aren't really gonna get all that far away from an enemy in order to use, you know, the hunting rifle at a very long range. And I actually hip fire most of the guns that I use, because when you're aiming your gun, there's no hit reticle. It's just where your flashlight is pointing. So if your flashlight is on the enemy and you just tap the right trigger, you'll automatically pull out your gun and shoot them. And it actually tracks them pretty far away too. So basically you can use the flashlight as the point in where you're aiming your gun. It sounds kind of complicated, but it's actually incredibly intuitive. Now I gotta admit, the dodge feature, not the best, okay? Like, I wish there was more ways that you could avoid hits, because, like, I don't know, maybe I just wasn't pressing it right, or I didn't get the right iframes in it or something, but I don't know what it was, but I just kept getting hit when I was running away from people. I don't know what was going on, but there was a handful of times where I was able to pull off some G moves. The flare also has the added benefit of it can be held throughout the entire duration of the flare's use, or you can drop it on the ground and use your flashlight as another source of damage on an enemy. It can actually change up the flow of combat pretty well. Last but not least, I do kind of wish that there was at least some sort of way you could know how much stamina you had, because it seems like even dodging attacks uses like this stamina, and you really don't have all that much of it. Alan gets tired very quickly. I mean, he must be, you know, packing on a couple of those LBs, you know, eating a little bit more of the Krispy Kremes than he would like to, you know. Thankfully, it seems like in Alan Wake 2, the combat has been completely overhauled. It has almost gotten sort of like a Resident Evil 4 remake type vibe, which is definitely really cool. That being said, I mean, I can't necessarily say it was like a game that blew me away. I mean, don't get me wrong, this game was actually really cool. Like, the story, I actually really enjoyed, especially in retrospect. I mean, I enjoyed playing through it. I just didn't really seem to grab onto it. I mean, there was a lot of times I felt like I was lost in the plot. But yeah, I can see if there's like a bunch of aspiring writers, you know, then this is pretty much one of those must-play sort of things. You know, because the story is just so expertly crafted with all of these little hints, and it definitely actually might even warrant a replay, just so that you can get all of the savory details. I mean, I'm pulling through the footage a couple hours later, and I'm still finding stuff. That being said, I don't know, I mean, I can't really give it any much more than a 7, to be honest. I mean, it is above average, don't get me wrong. Definitely an above average game, but I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe just, you know, the combat is just kind of dated for me. Maybe I didn't play it back in the day when, you know, my childhood was developing. And maybe you ask me on another day, I might say an 8. But as of right now, I feel like a 7 is pretty fair. But that's not to say it's not a good game. I mean, I can definitely see back in the day, like gameplay-wise, like this was probably, I would probably rate this like a 9, like an 8, 9, maybe even a 10 for the story and the gameplay, you know, but just because we've had so many, you know, great games come out within the past few years, you know, it's kind of a little bit difficult to really give it a fair shake. And on top of that, we have Alan Wake 2, which is going to be coming out this freaking month, and I cannot wait for that. Anyways, with that, I'm Mr.LetsGame. I hope you enjoyed the video. Peace.
You knew I'm a psycho. I told you I'm a psycho. Really?